The morning sun stretched long across the dry Texas plains, lighting up the horizon in bands of orange and crimson. Birds skimmed over the pastures, the smell of earth and hay lingering in the breeze. And then there was the fence. 6 feet tall, freshly painted white, stretching in both directions like some man-made scar. It hadn't been there yesterday, but today it wrapped tight around the entire property line like a chokehold, cutting off the gravel road, the gate, and the driveway. Isaiah Carter stood in his boots at the edge of it, a mug of black coffee steaming in his hand. His jaw was tight, his eyes locked on the padlock clamped onto the gate. "Son of a," he muttered under his breath, running a hand over his short beard. The sound of tires crunching gravel snapped him out of his thoughts. A white SUV slowed to a smug halt, dust curling around its wheels. Out stepped Gerald Whitmore, the HOA president, a man with a starched polo and a permanent smirk carved onto his face. "Well, well, Mr. Carter," Gerald drawled, slipping off his sunglasses. "Looks like you finally got yourself some boundaries." Isaiah said nothing. He just sipped his coffee, slow and steady, as if silence was sharper than words. Gerald walked closer, tapping the fence with his knuckle. Clink, clink. "See, this community's got rules. Rules about livestock, noise, appearances. Your little ranch lifestyle, it doesn't exactly fit the neighborhood image. So, the board voted. Fence stays. Access stays controlled." Isaiah's eyes finally flicked to him. Calm. Cold. "You build a fence around land that isn't yours." Gerald chuckled, feigning innocence. "Technically, easement dispute. The board has lawyers. You don't. That makes this our problem now." He patted the fence as if christening it. "Best thing you can do, Carter, is sell and move along. Somewhere more suited for your kind." Isaiah's jaw clenched. He didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he finished his coffee, placed the mug on the fence post, and turned his back. "Don't ignore me," Gerald barked. Isaiah didn't turn. His boots crunched against gravel as he walked toward his barn, the sunlight casting his frame in silhouette. From the porch, an elderly neighbor, Miss Hattie, watched the scene unfold. She shook her head, muttering, "Lord have mercy, they don't know who they're playing with." Inside the barn, Isaiah leaned against the workbench. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. He could hear his father's voice echoing in his head. "Never let a man see you rattled. Let him think he's won. That's when you move." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through a list of contacts, and hovered over a number. A name glared back at him. Harrison Law Group, Austin. He hesitated. Not yet. Timing mattered. Instead, he exhaled and set the phone down. His eyes drifted to the far end of the barn, where 3 glossy black steeds stomped in their stalls. His horses, his pride. He walked over, running his palm across the neck of the oldest, Midnight. "They think we don't belong here, huh?" Isaiah whispered. Midnight snorted in reply. The sound of hammers carried on the wind outside. Gerald's crew had returned, hammering reinforcement beams into the fence, laughing as if it were some kind of joke. Isaiah didn't storm out. He didn't shout. He just listened, letting every nail, every insult, every laugh sink in. That evening, the small community gathered for an HOA meeting in the rec hall. Gerald, of course, presided at the front, gloating as he listed new enforcements against Isaiah's ranch, noise ordinances, livestock restrictions, parking violations. "Point is," Gerald declared, "we're keeping this place orderly. No exceptions." Laughter and nods filled the room, but not all. Some neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Miss Hattie, sitting near the back, folded her arms. She'd lived there 40 years, and she could see arrogance when it strutted. Isaiah didn't attend. He sat on his porch, the glow of the rec hall lights faint in the distance. Instead, he read an old leather-bound ledger, his father's. Inside were deeds, letters, and notes scribbled from decades ago, reminders that his family had owned land long before most of the HOA members had even moved to Texas. And tucked in the back was something else, a number, a contact. Isaiah stared at it long into the night. The next morning, Gerald strutted by again, grinning at Isaiah through the bars of the new fence. You'll thank me one day, Carter, Gerald smirked. This fence adds value. Makes this neighborhood exclusive. Upscale. People like us need people like you too. Well, keep things grounded. Until, of course, you can't afford to stay. Isaiah studied him for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, voice calm as stone. You ever hear the saying, Gerald? Don't box a man in unless you're sure you know what he keeps inside. Gerald frowned. Cute. Real cute. Isaiah smiled faintly, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that said you'll see. As the day faded, the fence gleamed in the sunset, tall and proud, cutting him off from his own gate. But Isaiah didn't look beaten. He stood with his arms crossed, eyes locked on the horizon like a man measuring time itself. Somewhere, deep in his chest, the tide had already turned. The HOA just didn't know it yet. Where are you tuning in from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Isaiah's phone buzzed in his hand. He answered. Mr. Carter, a voice said smoothly on the line. This is Harrison Law Group. We received your message. You want to move forward. Isaiah's lips curled into the faintest grin. His eyes flicked to the fence one last time. Yeah, he said. Let's move. The night air was cool, laced with the hum of cicadas. Isaiah sat at his kitchen table, a single lamp casting warm light over stacks of documents. Deeds. Old tax records. Maps drawn in faded ink. His father's handwriting sprawled across the margins like ghostly whispers. He pressed the phone closer to his ear. Yes, he said again, his tone low, steady. Move forward. On the other end, Attorney Harrison's voice carried calm authority. Understood. From the details you've given, the HOA may have overstepped their legal right. But before we move, I'll need access to any documentation proving lineage of ownership. Isaiah's hand smoothed across the ledger. I have everything. Good. Send copies. And Mr. Carter. Harrison paused, his voice sharpening. Don't let them provoke you. The law moves quieter than anger, but it moves heavier. Isaiah ended the call and exhaled, staring at the stack of papers before him. His father's words resurfaced again. Patience is power. They'll never see it coming. The next day, Gerald strutted like a rooster, gathering a few HOA loyalists near the fence. They sipped their lattes, laughed too loudly, and threw pointed glances at Isaiah's ranch. Man's holding on by pride alone, Gerald sneered. One notice from the board, and he'll be packing. A chuckle from one of the men followed. Bet he doesn't even have the money to fight back. Isaiah was within earshot, hauling a bale of hay toward the barn. His muscles flexed under the weight, sweat dripping down his temple. He didn't look at them, didn't break stride. But inside, the words carved deep, not as wounds, but as fuel. Midnight his horse neighed loudly, almost as if echoing Isaiah's unspoken defiance. Gerald flinched at the sound, muttering something about rowdy animals, before walking off. Isaiah smiled faintly. He didn't need to answer their insults. Soon enough, the answer would come by itself. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, embossed seal. HOA ruling. Fines for livestock noise, penalties for unauthorized structures, demands for immediate compliance. Isaiah sat on the porch, turning the envelope slowly in his hands. Miss Hattie walked up the gravel path, cane tapping against the stones. Child, she said, lowering herself into the rocking chair beside him, they're poking the wrong bear. Isaiah chuckled softly. They think I'm cornered. MMHM. She adjusted her shawl. But I know that look in your eye. You're not cornered. You're waiting. He didn't deny it. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed her a picture. A digital image of a much larger map, parcels of land surrounding the HOA's neatly trimmed neighborhood. Every plot marked with an initial, many circled in red. Miss Hattie's eyebrows arched. Lord have mercy, you've been planning. Isaiah's voice dropped to a whisper. They fenced me out. But what they don't realize, he tapped the map, is I've already got a way in. Later that week, Harrison called again. Mr. Carter, we've done some digging. Your father's records show he owned not just a ranch, but rights to an access road the HOA has no legal claim over. That fence? It cuts across land they never had permission to touch. Isaiah's heart thudded, slow and steady. So they overreached. Severely, Harrison confirmed. We can take them to court, file an injunction. Or, he hesitated. There's another route. Acquisition. A buyout. HOA properties are tangled with debt from past developments. The right leverage, and you could own more than they realize. Isaiah leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking beneath him. His eyes flicked toward the horizon, where Gerald's pristine SUV gleamed under the sun. Send me the numbers, Isaiah said. That evening, the rec hall buzzed with chatter. Gerald stood at the podium, chest puffed out, addressing the community. Neighbors, we are the line between order and chaos. If we don't enforce our rules, this place falls apart. Mr. Carter may think he's above the law, but let me assure you, he's not. Applause rippled through the room, though not as strong as before. Some faces looked unsure, glancing toward one another. The unease was growing. From outside, through the cracked hall windows, headlights flashed. Isaiah's truck pulled up slow, deliberate. He didn't enter. He simply sat there, engine humming, presence looming like a storm cloud just offshore. Gerald faltered mid-sentence. His voice trembled for the first time. We will not tolerate disobedience. Isaiah never moved, never spoke. He just let the silence of his presence weigh on them, before finally reversing back down the gravel. Inside, Miss Hattie smirked knowingly. The shift had begun. That night, Isaiah couldn't sleep. He walked the fence line, the moon casting shadows across the boards. He ran his hand over the cold padlock, imagining Gerald's smug smile. But he didn't feel small. Not anymore. Instead, he felt the tide swelling, a quiet surge beneath his feet. He whispered into the night, voice steady and low. You put a fence around me, Gerald. But you don't even own the ground you're standing on. By dawn, a black sedan rolled up his driveway. Harrison stepped out, briefcase in hand, his suit sharp against the dusty backdrop. Mr. Carter, he greeted, shaking Isaiah's hand firmly. It's time we let them know who you are. Isaiah nodded, his face unreadable, but his eyes burning with quiet fire. The fence gleamed behind them, tall and smug. But in that moment, it looked less like a barrier, and more like the first domino. The rec hall's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Gerald shuffled papers at the podium. The HOA board members sat beside him, stiff-backed, smug, and sure of themselves. They were expecting another routine session, a show of power, another round of fines to pile on Isaiah Carter. But tonight wasn't routine. The heavy double doors creaked open. Heads turned. Isaiah walked in slow, hat in hand, boots clicking against the linoleum floor. Every eye in the room followed him, some with curiosity, others with disdain. Gerald smirked, leaning into the mic. Well, look who finally decided to show up. Mr. Carter, come to plead your case. Isaiah's expression didn't shift. He slid his hat onto the nearest chair and walked to the center aisle, his presence filling the hall like a storm front. No, he said, voice calm. I came to listen. The audience murmured. Gerald chuckled nervously. Listen? To what? How we're enforcing order. You don't belong here, Carter. That ranch of yours is an eyesore, and this fence is just the start. Isaiah tilted his head, watching Gerald like a predator watches prey. Funny thing about fences, he said slowly. They only hold if you built them on your land. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Gerald's smirk faltered. What's that supposed to mean? Before Isaiah could answer, the black sedan pulled up outside. Doors opened. Attorney Harrison stepped in, crisp suit, briefcase in hand. He set the case down on the front table, the click of the locks echoing in the room. Good evening, Harrison said smoothly. I represent Mr. Carter, and it seems this board has made a rather large mistake. The room fell into a tense silence as Harrison pulled out maps and documents, spreading them across the table for all to see. This, Harrison began, pointing to an old deed, is the original property survey of Carter Ranch, dated 1954. This, he tapped another paper, is the county's current record, updated less than a year ago. Notice the overlap. He slid the papers together, aligning them perfectly. Gasps filled the hall. The so-called HOA fence, Harrison continued, cuts through land the association does not own. Land belonging to Mr. Carter. Land his family has held for over 60 years. Gerald's face drained of color. That can't be right. We had permits. Permits mean nothing when the land isn't yours, Harrison cut in sharply. You have violated property rights. If this continues, the HOA faces legal damages that could bankrupt the association entirely. The crowd erupted. Some gasped, some whispered furiously, others glared at Gerald. Realization dawning that his arrogance might cost them all. Isaiah stayed quiet. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence was louder than Gerald's bluster. Gerald slammed his palm on the podium. This is nonsense. We've worked too hard to let one man. Isaiah finally spoke, his voice like low thunder. One man? Or the man who owns the ground your fence is standing on? The room froze. Gerald's mouth opened and closed, no words forming. For the first time, he looked small. Miss Hattie cackled from the back, cane tapping the floor. Told y'all. Wrong bear. The tension broke when Harrison snapped his briefcase shut. We'll be filing formally with the county tomorrow. I suggest you remove the fence before the law does it for you. Isaiah turned, picked up his hat, and walked out. No gloating. No smile. Just the steady stride of a man who knew the balance had shifted. The whispers followed him out the door. He had the deed. He owns more than we thought. What happens now? Out on the porch, the night air was cool. Isaiah inhaled deeply, staring across the dark fields. Harrison joined him, slipping his briefcase back into the sedan. You rattled them good tonight, Harrison said. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Not enough. Gerald won't stop. He's too proud. Men like him would rather drown than admit they can't swim. Harrison studied him for a moment. Then maybe it's time you stop fighting for a place at their table. Isaiah turned, brow furrowed. Maybe, Harrison said, it's time you buy the whole table. Isaiah lay awake that night, the words ringing in his mind. Buy the table. He opened his laptop, pulling up county property records. Lines of parcels lit up his screen, each one carrying numbers, values, debts, tax liens. He clicked through them slowly, deliberately. And there it was. A discovery that almost made him laugh. The HOA itself wasn't solvent. They were drowning in loans from a failed development project 5 years back. One misstep, one lawsuit, and the entire association could collapse. Isaiah leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing with realization. Gerald had fenced him in, but Isaiah could buy them out. The following morning, Isaiah stood at the fence again, watching Gerald's SUV crawl past. Their eyes met through the glass. Gerald smirked weakly, though it didn't carry the same fire. Isaiah simply tipped his hat. Not in surrender. In warning. If you're hooked right now and want to see how this unfolds, hit that subscribe button and tap like. It helps more people find these stories, and you don't want to miss what comes next. That night, Isaiah made another call. This time, not to Harrison. To a different contact. A banker. Mr. Carter. The voice on the line said, "You're looking at a full acquisition? That's ambitious." Isaiah's eyes drifted out across the moonlit land. Jaw set. Ambition's the only thing they left me. He hung up, the screen of his phone glowing in the darkness. His reflection looked back at him. Not a man beaten, but a man rising. And as the cicadas hummed, Isaiah whispered to himself, "You wanted me gone, Gerald. Instead, you just made me landlord." The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and paper, its marble floors echoing with the steps of clerks and attorneys. Isaiah walked in with measured calm, boots striking the floor in slow rhythm. At his side, Harrison carried a thick folder of documents, the kind that changed everything. They filed into the records office. Behind the counter, a clerk looked up, adjusting her glasses. "Mr. Carter?" Isaiah tipped his hat. "That's me." Harrison set the folder down with a heavy thump. "We're here to file purchase orders on several parcels of land surrounding the HOA property line." The clerk's brows lifted. "That many?" She flipped through the pages, her expression growing wider with each turn. This will give you majority ownership over the common areas." Harrison smiled faintly. "That's the point. Isaiah said nothing. His eyes were fixed ahead, steady, unblinking. Meanwhile, across town, Gerald stormed into the HOA office, sweat dripping down his temples. He slapped a foreclosure notice onto the desk in front of his treasurer. "What is this?" Gerald barked. The treasurer stammered. It's the development loan, Gerald. We missed payments. The bank's calling it due." Gerald's face flushed red. "Why am I just hearing this now? We thought we could buy time. But someone's been buying up parcels left and right. It's Carter, Gerald. It has to be Carter." Gerald's knees buckled slightly. He dropped into the leather chair, burying his face in his hands. That rancher, that damn rancher. For the first time, his laughter sounded nervous. "They told me he couldn't fight back. They told me he was just a man with horses." The treasurer leaned forward, voice trembling. What if he isn't just a man with horses? Back at the ranch, Isaiah sat with Miss Hattie on the porch. Papers were stacked neatly on the table between them. She leafed through one, her old eyes squinting. "You mean to tell me you're about to own the whole lakefront?" Isaiah nodded. "HOA used it as collateral. Bank put it up. I put in the winning bid." Miss Hattie leaned back, wheezing a laugh. "Gerald gone have a stroke when he finds out." Isaiah's gaze didn't soften. "This isn't about Gerald. This is about every man who thought I didn't belong here. Every man who thought land was just a line on paper. My father used to say, land is history. If you let someone write over it, they'll write you out with it." The cicadas sang into the night. Miss Hattie reached over, patting his hand. "Your daddy be proud. You're not just keeping his land. You're multiplying it." The following week, chaos gripped the neighborhood. Rumors spread like wildfire. "Carter owns the lake now." No, he bought the stables." Word is he controls the access road. Gerald can't even get deliveries without Carter's say-so." The whispers turned into arguments. Neighbors who once sneered at Isaiah now looked uneasy, wondering whose side they should stand on. Some even knocked on his door, their voices meek. "Mr. Carter, maybe we got off on the wrong foot." Isaiah didn't gloat. He simply nodded, his voice steady. "Respect's the only foot to stand on." Gerald, desperate, called an emergency meeting at the rec hall. His voice cracked as he spoke. "This is our neighborhood. We can't let one man take control. We'll fight him in court, we'll." But a hand shot up in the crowd. A woman's voice cut in. "Fight him with what money, Gerald? You drained us with that failed project. You've got us broke." Another voice chimed in, angrier. "You said the fence would protect us. Now it's cost us everything." Murmurs rose, loud, accusatory. Gerald pounded his fist on the podium. "He's nothing. He's a ranch hand with delusions." From the back, Miss Hattie cackled again. "Delusions? Honey, he just bought the ground you're standing on." The crowd erupted in gasps and shouts. Gerald's face turned crimson. He looked like a man who realized the gallows had been built beneath his own feet. That night, Isaiah walked the fence line again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Harrison stood beside him, hands in his pockets. "You've got leverage now," Harrison said. "The HOA can't breathe without your permission. You could dissolve them outright." Isaiah ran a hand across the wood, eyes narrowed. "Not yet. Let them stew. Pride's a crueler punishment than paper." He turned, looking out across the ranch that now stretched farther than even he had imagined. The moon cast silver across the land, making it glow. "I'm not just buying land," Isaiah murmured. "I'm buying their illusion of power, piece by piece, until the only thing they have left is the memory of thinking they could fence me in." The next morning, Gerald pulled up to Isaiah's ranch, red-eyed and haggard. He stormed out of his SUV, stomping to the fence. "Carter," he bellowed. Isaiah emerged from a barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He walked slowly toward the gate, posture calm, eyes sharp. "You got something to say, Gerald?" Gerald gripped the fence, knuckles white. "You won't get away with this. You think you can humiliate me? You think you can take everything I built?" Isaiah stopped just short of the gate. His voice was low measured. "I didn't take anything, Gerald. You gave it away. Every loan you signed, every lie you told, every neighbor you treated like a pawn. You handed me the keys. I just pick 'em up." Gerald's face twisted, torn between fury and fear. His voice cracked. "This isn't over." Isaiah leaned in slightly, his eyes like steel. "It's already over. You just haven't accepted it yet." The silence hung heavy, broken only by the wind rustling through the fence boards. For the first time, Gerald stepped back. The morning sun broke across the fields, spilling gold over Isaiah's ranch. But this morning was different. Trucks rolled in not with construction crews, but with surveyors and bank representatives. Clipboards, cameras, contracts, the machinery of change. Isaiah stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching as papers were signed, stamps pressed, and titles transferred. Piece by piece, parcel by parcel, the neighborhood ceased to belong to the HOA and shifted into his hands. By midday, Gerald received the letter, delivered straight to his door in a thick, official envelope. He tore it open, fingers trembling. Inside was one line that gutted him. Effective immediately, Carter Holdings has acquired controlling interest in the HOA common properties and liens. Gerald read it again, and again. His mouth went dry. "Carter Holdings?" he whispered aloud. He never even knew the man had a company. Never knew he had the reach, the foresight. Rage boiled through him, but beneath it, fear. For the first time, Gerald wasn't dealing with a man fenced in. He was dealing with a man who owned the fence. That evening, Isaiah called for a community gathering, not in the rec hall, but out in the open, on his ranch. The neighbors came, some wary, some curious, others ashamed for how they had laughed along with Gerald weeks before. Isaiah stood by the barn, tall against the setting sun. He didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. His voice carried naturally, steady as a drumbeat. "I know some of you thought I didn't belong here, thought this ranch was just noise, just trouble. But land has memory. My father fought to keep this soil, and I'll do the same. Not with fences, with stewardship." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People listened, really listened. Isaiah continued. "The HOA forgot that power isn't in rules. It's in responsibility. That fence they built, it wasn't about order. It was about control. Well, control has changed hands." He let the words settle. From the back, a neighbor raised her hand nervously. "Mr. Carter, does this mean the HOA is finished?" Isaiah looked out over the crowd, his gaze unwavering. "The HOA, as you knew it, is gone. What happens next? That depends on all of us. Respect goes both ways." Gerald pushed through the crowd, his face flushed, eyes wild. "You can't just erase us," he shouted. "I built this neighborhood. I kept it safe. Isaiah cut him off, calm but sharp. "Safe? You caged your own neighbors. You used rules to humiliate, not protect. And now those rules don't belong to you." The crowd stirred, voices rising in agreement. Some clapped. Others glared at Gerald with resentment for the fines, the bullying, the arrogance he had lorded over them for years. For the first time, Gerald stood alone. Isaiah stepped closer, voice low but carrying weight. "You fenced me in, Gerald. But in trying to cut me out, you handed me the deed to everything you thought you controlled." Gerald's lip trembled, his voice breaking. This was never supposed to happen. Isaiah stared at him, eyes steady. "That's the problem with fences. You build to keep people out. But sometimes they just box you in." Gerald staggered back, the crowd parting, as if the ground itself had given way beneath him. His reign was over. Weeks passed. The fence came down, plank by plank, lock by lock. Neighbors who once sneered now offered help. Isaiah didn't turn them away. He accepted, but never forgot. The land stretched free again, open under the endless Texas sky. And at its heart, Isaiah stood, not as the man they underestimated, but as the man they now answered to. Harrison visited once more, handing Isaiah the final stack of signed documents. "It's done. You own the ranch, the common areas, the roads, the lake. Gerald's HOA is a ghost." Isaiah took the folder, but didn't smile. He simply looked out across the land, his voice quiet. "My father used to say, land doesn't just belong to you. You belong to it. That's the difference between ownership and stewardship." Harrison nodded. "And now you get to decide how it's remembered." That night, Isaiah walked the ranch alone, the moon spilling silver across the fields. Midnight trotted beside him, hooves soft in the dirt. He stopped at the old fence posts, the last remnants waiting to be hauled away. Running his hand across the wood, he whispered to himself, "They thought I was the man boxed in. Turns out I was the man holding the box." The wind carried his words into the night, settling over the land that now stretched further than anyone had imagined. Isaiah tipped his hat back, his eyes shining with a fire that came not from revenge, but from reclamation. For him, for his father, for every man ever told he didn't belong. The ranch was his. The neighborhood was his. The story was his. If this story left you stunned, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because stories like this deserve to be heard. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and share this video if you believe in standing your ground when the world underestimates you.